Well, because and sorry, Ben, I can't remember your surname.
Fountain. Ben Fountain.
Right.
So my apologies, I forgot to introduce my colleague Ben Fountain.
So Ben is from SKM, which is the contractor that you've brought in to assist with this work. But when I understand that you actually brought SKM in early, so you came out of the SKIRT program and in to help the council with the flooding issues?
Yeah, so in sometime in August 2012, so bearing in mind that we had our last big shake in about December 2011, reflew LIDAR, got all the modelling back up.
23rd at 10 to 1.
10 to 1, yeah.
Never forget it.
So at around that time, we were, SKIRT was looking at a whole lot of, was actually looking at this catchment as well. The council was also looking at this catchment in terms of the recovery of the waterway, which was outside of SKIRT's scope. And when we put this project out as one of our key, was one of our first priority areas, SKM were given the job to assist the council because of their experience, predominantly because of their experience in SKIRT.
So that was because you had the flooding in Flockton in August 2012.
Yep.
And so you brought in the external help then, and that's really when you started looking at all of the options that were available.
Yep.
So this work's been ongoing, and then we had the June event.
Yes.
Which sort of ramped things up a bit, and that helped you narrow down to the two options.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so now we're sort of ramping things up again.
Yep.
And we're coming up with some temporary solutions that can form part of a long-term solution.
Yes, in fact, I would say probably maybe even the language we've used is maybe not quite right. Temporary, this pump station, once it's in, will become part of our network.
Yeah.
It will form part of our permanent network.
Right.
And it will continue to provide significant benefit to the drainage of this area.
And it's not sort of like, it's not something that you just pull. I think what I'm trying to tease out here is that it's not something that you've just pulled out of your hat. It is something that was in the suite of options that were being considered last year.
Yep.
And it's because of the urgency of the situation, we've now looked at it as part of that permanent long-term solution.
Absolutely.
Yep. But not the only part.
No, it's not the only part. No, there's the other options.
And why would you not want to rely on a pump for the only option?
That's exactly right. I mean, the permanent option for option 2 that we presented to council in March. One of those options is a pump station and a bypass, but there is still significant channel widening as well. So. That provides a significant amount. That provides a more permanent solution that reduces the levels of risk down to almost or better than pre-quake levels of risk. That's the option 2, and that's a pump station option. It's probably in terms of ongoing resilience not as good as a gravity option because you're relying on mechanical structures and operating procedures, but it's absolutely viable.
Yeah. No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just I think that there's a whole story here that, those of us that only got elected last year have not really understood in terms of the extent of what's been going on. Yeah. Carry on.
Okay, that's right. So if we're going through the Tay Street and Flockton Drain Pump Station report, within the executive summary, there is a table, items 2.3 and 2.4 in the executive summary. We've confirmed the feasibility of this as an option, and it reduces the number of floor levels flooded in the more frequent events such as August 2012, June 2013 and April 2014. And it's really important to note, I think, that I have omitted to say March 2014 because in terms of the rainfall record, that is an extreme rainfall event, and to focus on that would be to skew the whole investigation. So that table below there summarises the floor levels at risk during an event with an average return interval of 10 years. So that's basically the June event. It returns Pre-quake, the number of floor levels at risk were 3. Post-earthquake, the number of floor levels at risk were 28. With the Tay Street drain pumping station option, it reduces to 9. The estimated project cost is $4.35 million and is expected to become fully operational with its full 2 cubic metre a second capacity within 4 months. However, within 2 months, approximately half a cubic metre a second capacity will be available with temporary skid-mounted pumps. So we will be seeing some benefit, an improved level of protection to this area within 8 weeks. It does assist the long-term solution for Dudley Creek and Flockton Basin and may reduce the costs of those. In terms of delivery, this is a fast-track approach which provides a quick reduction in flood risk. I've talked through the location, as you can see on the screen there. So starting at the Mayoral Public Library and going north up through Philpotts Road to the Upper Dudley diversion. There was a decision made early last week, and I'm looking at page in the report, section 8 around procurement. There was an early decision taken last week to proceed with the purchase of the pipe. Those colleagues of mine who've been in the pipe buying area of the council said that when a pipe's available and you need it, you buy it. Any delays resulting from your decision can add months to the project. So our consultants sourced a supplier in Melbourne who was actually tooled up, ready to do a run of this pipe. We made an we recommended to the Chief Executive, the Mayor and the Chair of this committee,
Chair of the Environment Committee.
I beg pardon, the Chair of the Environment Committee, that an early decision to procure that pipe be made. Yep. They were informed by us technically and by Council's procurement policy staff, who advised that was appropriate to do that. The risks associated with that was, of course, is if you say no to this today, what happens to that pipe? That pipe will still get used. It's not a sunk cost. It will be used at some other point in the rebuild. So that's an early decision made to proceed in order to get some quick runs on the board. I just wanted to point out, I suppose for you who will be making a decision on this today, the factors that might influence your confidence and the associated risks. They're in item 5.7 on the report. I know I'm jumping backwards. I just want to point out those 5.7.1 to 5.7.5, and those issues relating to the hydraulic certainty, the benefited properties, the work we've done around feasibility, costs and the pump station location. So I'll just quickly talk about those because I think they're important that if we have a discussion that those might be areas we could focus on. Hydraulic certainty, as we just discussed before, that is really driven by the earlier work we did prior to November 2013 when we tested a scenario exactly like this, though not in this location. It was about 200 odd metres further south. So this has been modelled. We're confident that with the way we operate the Cranford Basin and the Dudley diversion, that there will be capacity in the diversion and in the basin. So there's a high level of confidence that any adverse impacts on those two assets can be managed. We are confident, in fact a high level of confidence, that there's going to be a significant reduction in the number of floors at risk. But I would caution that predicting the exact number has less confidence due to the variability in rainfall. So you can get a different storm profile, different intensities, different durations. It could still be a 10-year event, but getting exactitude around those numbers would always be problematic. But we are absolutely confident that the order of magnitude of properties benefited is high. Technical feasibility, so over the first 2 or 3 weeks of the task force with our engineers and our contractors, we've been out doing some site geotech testing, some potholing, looking at where we're going to get materials from and sourcing suppliers and the costs around that. So there's a high level of confidence in the feasibility of the pump station and the design of the rising main. In terms of costing confidence, that is high also. We've sought current work production rates out of the maintenance contract, applied those to the project, and we've got a good level of costing confidence around that. Really, the risks to the project are around delays in procuring materials, and the cost here has a 20% contingency. One other risk, we haven't engaged in any community or private landowner consultation, so we haven't spoken to the library or landowners adjoining the pump station. So the pump station itself can be located entirely within the library site, or even adjacent to it, slightly within the legal road. But we haven't spoken to the library, and we haven't spoken to those two landowners adjacent to that yet. So those are the that's a fly through the risks and the issues. We've talked about the procurement and sourcing the material, early decision to source the pipe from Australia. So our recommendation is to approve the Tay Street pump station design and construction at a cost of $4.35 million. To direct the Chief Executive to initiate discussions with the Director of the Christchurch Central Development Unit to consider whether this fits within our stormwater projects and the cost share, and that's a key part of this, to actually get the costs sitting in absolutely the right place. If that isn't achieved, then the resolution is to note that the Building Infrastructure Improvement Borrowing Allowance could be used as a source of funding. A key aspect of this project is speed, in which case we've got City Care and our consultant engineers who are committed to getting on with this project and able to deploy immediately. So in that respect, we're looking for a resolution to confirm the direct appointment of both City Care Limited and Jacobs New Zealand Limited as contractor and designer respectively. The report carries a summary of the emergency procurement methodology that requires us to look to inform the Office of the Auditor General and go through a number of steps. We need to actually make sure we cover that off, and we also need to respectively authorise the expenditure of $300,000 on the rising main. And the final recommendation is to undertake private property and libraries consultation. So that is the Tay Street Drain Pump Station. Excellent.
Well, I'll move that, and Phil will second that as well. And now I'll open both reports up for questions. I'll start off with questions. Phil.
Thank you very much, Mike, and just reiterating the Mayor's grateful thanks to you and your team. It's been terrific.
Thank you.
Mike, just on the pump itself, and you've explained that in fact one pump can pump something like 2 cubic metres of water a second, and the other about, I think it's half a metre. But just for us as lay people, could you perhaps explain that, how that would look like in terms of volume or weight?
1 cubic metre a second. So, 1 cubic metre a second is a 1 metre high by 1 metre wide by 1 metre that way. So that's the. You mentioned 2 of those. That's the volume of water that you're shifting out of that drain. So it's pulling it out of effectively it's pulling out of Mayoral Drain, or the extension of Mayoral Drain, which fills up pretty quickly and has a huge storage area in it, which allows us to pick that up and shoot it north.
Thanks, Mike. And my other question really is just around the number of properties that will benefit, just from the data you gave us before.
Yep.
What the direct benefit was for 129, and reduced flooding was for another 214.
Yep.
So in fact, we're looking at over 340 properties that will benefit from the pumping system.
Yep, that's right. Yep. That's
a
right.
lot of
But 129 of those will see the flooding. The risk is virtually removed.
The risk is virtually removed. Yes.
In regular flooding.
So
and regular flooding. Yeah, it's very important to remember that this is about regular flooding.
Regular flooding. Yeah, it's a lot of houses. Thank you, Mike.
Yep. David?
Just a point of clarification and acknowledgement of basic physics, I suppose. Are you taking the flow out of Tay Street drain into this system?
Yes, the Tay Street drain feeds into, it's not coming out of Tay Street drain per se.
But you're going upstream to take it out. And Mayoral drain.
Tay Street drain is coming down to meet Mayoral drain, which at this point is
upstream and Mayoral drain.
And then we're pumping up Kensington and
the collection area and for the pump is upstream in the Mayoral drain. So how are we getting the water from the Tay Street drain to the Mayoral pumping station, which is upstream?
I suppose it's the way engineers euphemistically describe what it is they're doing. So it's the Tay Street drain, the Tay Street catchment, effectively, which we are stopping and beheading from going down Mayoral drain. So probably it's not very explained very well in the way we've named it, but effectively that Tay Street drain catchment is being beheaded in part and sent north.
Ellie?
Thank you. Great work, and thank you for the work that you're doing, particularly at the community meetings. I know that it's days and nights, and the feedback from the residents has been overwhelmingly positive for the communication. One thing that we have had though in those meetings, and you may not be able to answer this, is what next for the residents? And I think it might have been picked up in a media story today too. When are we going to know if we're one of those or if we're not? And do you know what happens next, Mike, with the...
Yes, so we're working with our comms team to make sure we're getting back to those people who have filled in the survey, the 330 that have called, 308 I think that we've put through the survey. So we get back to them with, this is where you are, vulnerability 1, 2 or 3. And one of the things that we're very aware of is that we haven't reported back on some of the things we found out in those surveys. So that will be need to be something we come back to you on, but that forms part of one of those earlier resolutions. So we're aware of that. That's a job to do.
And I guess the next question, if you're a resident, is when will they hear from you?
I would like to think we'll be back talking to those people next week.
Thank you. And finally, those 11 houses that the risk is still there for,
Yeah.
will they be the houses that you will talk to about temporary mitigation with regards to the wrapping and the options?
Absolutely. We're looking at those people and those households as candidates for that. Yes, absolutely.
Andrew?
Thank you, and thank you, Mike and the team, for all the amazing work you've done on this. The speed at which you've responded to some of this stuff has been amazing. I've attended 2 of the public meetings, and I think the quality of delivery and the information content has been excellent. And I know there's been some hostility within those meetings, but from my experience, most people, if not all people, have gone away happy. So thank you for that. Now, I've got 2 questions on the first report. Referring to paragraphs 2.7 and 2.8, Little River removed from the scope of the task force because it's found not to be earthquake related, and I fully understand the reason now for moving that from the scope. That's obviously been handed over to the joint working party.
Yes.
Have you made any recommendations to them as you've done the handover, and what could the community expect the next steps to be from that group?
Yes, there are a number of recommendations in the Stage 1 Task Force report around where work could be done and, in fact, dare I say it, probably should be done to manage that risk. What isn't clear exactly is how the work will be done, and that is going to be the job of that swim group to sheet home exactly where the responsibilities lie at a local authority level, at a regional authority level, but also more importantly, I think for that community at a property owner level, a lot of this work is required to be done on private land, and that swim group is really going to be teasing that out over the coming weeks.
Great, thank you for that. And on 2.8, obviously Littleton is an area that you've identified as needing some more detailed work starting from next week. Can you make some comments on what the next steps would be for Littleton and what sort of timelines you're working within?
That work will be starting immediately next week. With this, getting through this phase here will allow us to really hit Littleton a lot harder with more engineers than if we'd just gone out with, say 1 or 2. The investigation into Littleton will also have a strong geotechnical component, and we're also going to, and we spoke to some residents last night after the meeting in the Q&A, around doing a walkover similar to what we did in Heathcote Valley. And I was looking for Sarah Templeton, which doesn't sit here, but what we did in Heathcote Valley, where it was hugely beneficial to us as asset managers and engineers to engage with the local community, and it is astounding the knowledge that they have of their own network. And so I'm looking to do that exact same thing on a Saturday morning in about 10 days' time. So that will happen. That's going to inform us, a lot around where the risks are. But there's some things we're doing immediately. For example, Canterbury Street, the intake into that, the intake structure into that over the next couple of weeks is going to be replaced. That's a temporary fix until we can get in there in the summer months and put in a more permanent, better designed structure. So that's happening immediately. But I did give an undertaking last night that my hope is that within 3 weeks we'll be back out at Littleton to a similar community meeting saying, this is what you told us, this is what you wanted us to answer, and here's what we're going to be doing. So 3 weeks' time we'll be back out to Littleton.
That's great. And I mean, that really totally underlines the point I made at the beginning of my questions. The speed at which all of this work is happening, I think, is a lot faster than a lot of people in the community believe it would have been. So that's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Paul.
Just want to echo the comments around here. Woolston and Summer have also appreciated your work out there too, Mike, so thanks for that. The question I have is, you're removing a considerable amount of water from one area and transferring it to another area.
Yep.
And I suppose from a layman's perspective, the question I'd be asking is, when you move that water from one spot to another spot, is that new spot going to be able to handle that capacity?
Yep. The answer to that is yes. There will be a point in time where if you get a storm that goes beyond a certain rainfall profile, depth and duration, well, you're going to have to turn those pumps off, because those other areas need to have their natural, have that capacity which is theirs. But you get a huge amount of variability in rainfall. You can have, for example, in March, you had an event which is a 130-year-old event out at Botanic Rainfall Gardens. Then when you look at what happened out in the sticks, it barely registered as a significant event at all. So you can get variability across the city where we don't actually use the capacity in the network, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here.
I suppose that actually points to the point you've made, is that the vulnerability actually still remains given certain major events.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, it does. Yep.
Yanni.
Great, thank you for the work you're doing, as everyone said. So just in terms of I've got a question specifically on Tay Street and then some wider ones around the other stuff. Just start with Tay Street. Just wanted to be clear, the benefit of spending this money now would, if one of the options that was obviously put on the table was retreat. So I just want to be really clear, the money that we would spend on Tay Street would probably be done regardless of whether there's a component of retreat through that area with a map that you had. So is that true? It's got wider catchment.
Yes, this will allows us to draw down the water levels on that Tay Street drain catchment as well, and that would be further improved by adding more pipe work in the area.
But is there any of that area that's been considered for retreat?
I'm not aware. Well, we haven't actually considered retreat, as an option, or reported on that as an option. So, yeah.
Because of the nature of Mayoral Drain, how it has banks that are perched above the low points within that Flockton area, anything you do to lower water levels in that drain will be beneficial, regardless of what long-term option you choose. So yeah, definitely will fit in with whatever long-term option you have in that area.
Okay, that's good.
But the answer to the question was that this is whatever option we go with, whether it's an engineering solution or a change of land use solution, this we would do anyway.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
And then just in terms of the other report, I was concerned that you've said in the central city around the lower, is it the lower Avon, or you haven't seen any places be it vulnerable? I would have thought around the Avon Loop. Sorry, it was on page 12 of the report.
Yep.
So the lower Avon catchment has no vulnerable properties outside the residential red zone.
Yes.
That, like when you look at the Avon Loop, for example, there are a number of green zone properties. Have you done any assessment about their vulnerability?
We had field teams go out. I'm going to, every single public meeting we've been at, we've had residents putting their hands up going, oh, actually, no, we're in that criteria. So I'm actually expecting when we go out to a public meeting, we are going to flush out better data around that. But that's what we came up with on our initial report. We haven't gone back and looked at that in detail. So I'm going to send engineers back out there.
I was just concerned that there was an inference that the central city was excluded from the initial terms of reference of the task force. I just want to be clear that there is a work stream underway to look at, particularly around those inner city residential areas that had flooding.
No, that was outside of the central city area was outside of the scope of the initial task force. So we've identified, though you can identify. So I think even looking at the map that we've got in the report, it does show that people within the central city have put their hands up. So at this stage, that's out of my scope. I'm not saying I'm not going to look at it, but it's the part of the project control group will direct me to look in there. So
Useful today then to formulate a resolution around that?
Sorry?
Around the Avon Loop area and the flooding. That there's no work being done. It's out of the scope of the task force. Central City. But there was significant flooding in that area. So. Yeah, I sent through some photos of someone that had taken around a resident that was really, really concerned.
But houses have been inundated?
Well, I don't know. That's why I was kind of expecting. I fed in when the task force was being set up that this was an area I wanted looked at. I fed in also to the acting chief executive, Alyssa Streets. Yeah, that's why I was.
That people's floor levels were breached?
Not specifically. No. I haven't followed that through because I thought the task force would be doing that.
Yeah, but basically what the task force has done publicly is say, if your floor levels were breached, tell us. And so, I would encourage you to go and talk to the people in that neighbourhood and find out, I don't know whether any have actually probably already done that.
Yep, so what we can say about that is that people from across the city have phoned in. They're not limited to the areas that were defined by the brief. So we will report back to you where those other calls are coming from and what the numbers are. So we will send...
And we have asked for that.
Yep,
so,
and we'll send engineers out to look at those areas. But I suppose in terms of expending time and effort in area schemes and house protection, we're not briefed to go into those areas to do that just yet.
Not yet, but it may well be that there are areas that we haven't identified at the beginning of the process that we will want to identify later. And as we say, one of them's already dropped off because it's